Hi, everybody. Good day, everybody. This is episode 2 of Immigration Touchpoint with myself, Austin, and Paola, your host, and an amazing attorney with us. So we're for the second time. We're doing this every last Sunday of the month at 5 p.m. And we kind of like doing this touch point based on things that have happened throughout the month. We'll touch a little bit on it and then we'll go into some topics as well regarding to immigration. So today we're talking about visitors visa and then also we'll talk about dual citizenship. I know in various community this has been an issue going on around, so we will tackle it and we will address it today so that you can know what's the right thing to do. Because as at now, no law has, let me not get into that. We'll talk about it. I'll go ahead and hand it over to Attorney Moore to kind of like talk about the visitors visa. And then after that, we'll go into dual citizenship and Q&As on that.
Okay. Well, for those who don't know me yet, so I am Maud Puda. I'm attorney, board certified in immigration law. I practice here in Orlando with the law firm of Vasquez. And I've been around for about, 20 something years doing just that, immigration. So, we help all kinds of people with all kinds of immigration, benefits from family to business to, visitor's visa. And, I used to do a lot more like asylum and removal defense, but, shying away from that now. So the topic of the day, I'm not sure it's a hot topic, but it's, nonetheless a topic which, can be used for multiple entries. So depending on the country you come from, some could be 10 years, where I'm from in France, we have 10 years visitor's visa, and then some other country may be much less than that. So depending on the, reciprocity, essentially with the United States and that country, the length of time on the visa is, more or less, different. But the entry into the US is always going to be a 6-month authorization to remain in the US with the ability, to stay 6 months consecutively, or, break it down in, multiple trips in 1 year. Some people would ask, okay, well, can I, go to 6 months and then depart, stay overseas for 2 weeks and then come back? Maybe. That's always going to be at the discretion of the officer, that's going to let you in the United States. So, once you have your visa, that's great. Then, you can go about, planning your trips. But yes, at some point, the officer letting you inside the United States may ask, okay, what are your ties to your home country? What are you doing here? If you're staying 6 months out of the year, obviously they may ask, how you're supporting yourself, what is your source of income, and so forth. So, limiting your time here to 6 months a year, obviously may be the best. But there are possibility to extend your stay in the U.S. via an application, which is called an extension, extension of status in the United States with the USCIS office, which allows you to basically get an extension for 6 months time. But that's not really the subject of today's, how do you really get your visa in the first place? Because that's going to be the hardest thing. So, depending on, where you're coming from, if you have family members that want to visit you here, from Africa. This is an African association. So we're pretty much strictly, talking about the U.S. consulate posts in Africa. And so, as I said, depending on, where the person's coming from, whether you've had visa, approved in the past or visa denied or visa revoked, denied entry in the U.S. or any past immigration violations. So those are, very important questions because, okay, the consular officer, I know they have multiple officers at each post dealing with these visa applications. However, imagine how many applicants they see a day. It's probably, over 200 applicants that present, their visa applications on any one day. So, they do have they have maybe 2 to 3 minutes per visa applicant to make a decision about your case. And, the way I found that is, we sometime with our, immigration attorney community, we have, many of the liaison meetings and all sorts of seminars where actual former consular officers join in. They're now maybe in private practice and, they do talk about these things. So when they were consular officers, what exactly do they look at and how much time do they have to review these applications? So, I was surprised myself to hear, okay, day, 2 to 3 minutes, is this visa application, right? That DS-160 that you will fill out, or your relative will fill out. So it's important to be, very concise. Obviously, you're going to have to be straightforward, not lie, because they have access to everything, and, show as much ties as possible in that application. So it's really going to come down to, okay, do you have enough ties to your home country, such as family members, if you're married, do you have children that, will stay behind? And then your employment. Are you currently employed? Is that, provable? Do you have evidence that you can provide in case, they do ask for evidence of your employment? And then how much do you earn? Are you going to have enough money to support yourself while in the United States? So sometimes, people will get, like a sponsor, maybe a family member here in the US, a US citizen child, or, parent or whatnot, that's willing to kind of sponsor the application. I mean, yes, that's great, because it's important to have an actual contact and for them to know where you're going to be living while in the US. And, that person can certainly write a letter explaining why they're visiting you, that they will support you throughout the trip financially, room and board, etc., but also have a very good reason as to why you're coming to visit, whether it's the birth of a child, maybe it's a wedding, or maybe your relative is very sick and they need you, to help out, with, assisting, as far as the medical assistance. And so, providing that letter with also some evidence of income, showing that they can also support you financially, is pretty helpful. But as I said, sometimes they're not going to ask for any documentation because they don't have the time. So they will just base their decision on that DS-160. So the more ties, really, at the end of the day, it's the more ties you have back home, the more likely you will get that visa. But, while looking at statistics, I was kind of actually surprised. I mean, knowing, Africa has a higher rate of denial than many other countries. At least that's, one of the continent where there's a high rate of denial. It is about 30% denial rate. So that's from like 2022. And many other countries, like let's say France, I compared, that's 12.55%. So, an application for B1, B2 is 3 times more likely to be denied in an African country than it is, maybe in Europe, let's say. And why? Is because a lot of people, actually overstay. As I say, it's a high fraud post. And also, a lot of people do not go back. Okay. That's not to say that they're not granting those visas, obviously. Every case is different. And looking at statistics, I was checking, okay, how many visas are getting granted. Maybe in Abuja or Lagos. And I checked, December 2024. In Abuja, just a month alone, they granted 1,977. And in Lagos, you had 2,244, which, I think that's a pretty good number, knowing that there is this 30% denial rate. So, you have to stay positive, obviously, but yes, have everything together. And as I said before, sometimes the consular officers will not ask for any documentation, but, when we do help out with these applications, we always kind of put a little folder together for the applicant with our cover letter, kind of explaining, okay, what is the purpose of the trip? And then, the type of evidence that the person could have with them to show those ties. So, maybe it's going to be property, so financial ties to your country, property, title, evidence of employment, pay stubs, letter from employer, et cetera, and bank accounts. So those are helpful, to show that you will be able to support yourself in the U.S. If that's not the case, then have your family relative in the U.S., prove your family relationship, with bank statements and, maybe birth certificate to show the relationship. So, during COVID, obviously we had a huge backlog on these applications, but they are getting better, I have to say. But in some countries, it still takes, 6 months or more to get an interview. I think they are, doing their best to get, better and do a more efficient job. But, unfortunately, that's usually the reason for the denial. They can also deny based on Section 220G of the Immigration Nationality Act. And that's usually when there's like incomplete documentation and the consular officer will require additional evidence. And sometimes that is good. We do see those sometimes when maybe there's like past criminal record. So if you get to that stage, that's a pretty good sign that, that the officer would even care to look at your criminal records, for example, or any other, past documentation that you have. There could be fraud suspicion, past visa violations. One also that we have to consider is, let's say you have a family relative in the US. And when I'm saying you is, the applicant applying for the visa abroad. But let's say, you have a family relative in the US that actually filed an immigrant petition for you, an I-130 petition to bring you here. Well, that's obviously a sign that you want to immigrate to the US, right? So it's not compatible with a B1, B2 visa. So even if you're like maybe in what's called the fourth preference category, where it's a brother or sister filing for you, that's going to take like 16 to 17 years, right? So what does that mean? What does it mean? Are you going to have to wait, 17 years to apply for something? I mean, you have to continue renewing your B2 and never file the I-130. So, they don't like it. Do I say you can't file the I-130? Probably not. There's always an explanation for everything. But it could be a sign of, immigrant intent, which they don't like. What could I say? As far as, being straightforward with the officer, on the day of your interview, if they ask questions, you can't be, very elusive. You have to go straight to the point. Again, you don't have much time to explain yourself. So you have to be clear and concise as far as questions, show your documents if they do ask for those documents. And then, have that sponsor if needed in the United States. And then clear intent as far as why you're coming to the US. You may have 2 seconds to explain yourself. Okay, why are you coming to the US? Well, I'm going to visit my relative. Do you have a job back home? Yes, you have to explain yourself. So, everything has to make sense as far as the application you fill out and, your testimony, what you're going to say the day of the interview. Okay. So I don't know. Do you have questions for me as far as the chat, or maybe Austin has? Oh, what I wanted to say is also, there's been some new, procedures, I would say. So for those renewing visas, B1, B2 visa, now there are interview waivers. So if they've had a visa in the same category in the past, so somebody has had a B1, B2 in the past, they want to renew it. Now you actually don't have to show up for an interview as long as, you're applying within, say, let's 12 months prior to the application. The expiration has to be less than 12 months prior to the new application. And you're applying in that same country for the same visa. So, you may have an interview waiver. But that's about it as far as B1, B2 visa. You may, I'm not going to get into waivers, if there is, prior criminal records, fraud. That's for any type of visas where you may require what's called a waiver of ground of inadmissibility, meaning because, you have a fraud finding or criminal record that makes you inadmissible to the US. Now you have to basically ask for forgiveness with the immigration service. And obviously that makes it, obviously a lot harder to get a B1, B2 visa, but it is doable. That's a pathway to get the visa if you get to that stage. So, yeah.
There's one question that dropped in. Amanda, you see the question? I think somebody's asking a question. You can just read it. Let's see.
Yeah, just asking. Can Anna finally go back home for family emergency bereavement and they have not yet gotten a green card but have been granted indefinite? They go back and then come back into the country without any kind of hindrance.
I'm not sure I understood the question. I'm sorry. Can you repeat?
Okay. Here's the question. Can someone seeking asylum who has been granted indefinite stay but has not yet got the green card, can they go back to their home country for bereavement?
No, that's a huge red flag. Obviously, if you seek asylum is because you fear persecution in your home country. Yeah, they're gonna take you this.
No, like that. No, yeah, but it makes. You're trying to find asylum here because of your country, but then, what? Let me tell you, I'm seeking asylum from my country, Uganda, and I want to go back for bereavement in Uganda. But then I say I'm going to another country for bereavement, not exactly saying to my country. And then I do not use my passport to go to my, is that, does that make sense?
Sounds like, how would you say, going around, the law, but I can't advise about that, honestly. Third country, that's not your home country. And, you do what you have to do.
Yeah,
I'm sure they can find
my take about it is don't even.
I would not.
because if you're an asylee and you are given permanent stay or indefinite stay, that's not permanent resident. You are not a permanent resident. So if you choose to leave, that's on your own risk, at your own risk. So
Yeah, I think you can actually apply for like a travel document, but again, that does not guarantee you entering the US. Even if you are a permanent resident, so after 1 year of being an asylee, you can apply for the green card. And even then, at the citizenship stage, if they do see that you've traveled to that same country that you claim you got persecuted from, they could take that permanent residency away for, based on fraud or something like that. So not recommended until you get that
I'll give
citizenship.
one practical example.
If I become a U.S. citizen and I got it through asylum and then I go back to my country, can it be revoked?
No.
Or it cannot?
No, at that stage, I mean, there's no process down the, where they're going to say, okay, you were not supposed to travel to that country. So once you're a citizen, you're fine. They're not going to inquire about your past travel.
Alrighty, so I think that's on travel. We've talked about visitor's visa. So now we want to go to the hot topic, the what every community is. Okay, somebody just dropped a question saying,
Another question.
What petition can we fill out for a child we've adopted and they want to come to the U.S. to study? Should that be the I-120 student visa or go for adoption?
Go do. Adoption is very, very difficult.
Yeah, and difficult. I have heard so many people.
Is this like a child of a sibling,
it's
they're
just like
saying?
a kid that has been adopted.
Pretty
So
fine.
now the thing is, whether it's related to them or not, I don't know. So
Turning 21, about 18 now. So, yeah.
Oh, the child's already 21. So I think for immigration purposes, as long as they're adopted before age 16, but then the petition has to be done prior to age 21, otherwise they fall in a separate category. But the adoption is, has to be specifically done according to, again, we don't know which country this is from, but it could, if it's based on the Hague Convention, there are very strict procedures to follow as far as even the adoption itself. Is the adoption valid for immigration purposes? So there's a bunch of stuff. I don't even get into adoption because it's so complicated.
From him was adopted since 10 years. In 16 years.
So that's your child.
So, but the thing though, for me, what I'm thinking is, sometimes in Africa, when we adopt people, we don't actually like legally go and we just take somebody's kid or take somebody and then just raise them as our own kids and stuff. So now the thing now will be the legal aspect of it.
It does.
So
yeah. And like people that really specialize in that for, I think I researched Cameroon was a very difficult country to actually adopt from for immigration purposes because they had stopped even doing it for a while. They were not even accepting immigrant petitions, if I recall. But, I'll have to check on my end. I don't want to interrupt the whole podcast. But yes, I mean, this person wants to contact me. We can take a look at it. As far as the feasibility of, bringing a child under these circumstances to the U.S. It is a very long process, I have to say, and yes, convoluted. So, if the adoption is great, you did everything you should be doing, as long as the petition is filed before age 21. If the adoption was done prior to age 16, then, they should be fine. But yes, other than that,
already, so
would
let's
work.
jump into the hot topic. Okay, dual citizenship. I know some people are just laughing, watching right now. A serious debate in our community. People are like, I'm confused. I'm hearing mixed messages. I don't know which one to be. So let's just tackle it right here, and so that our people can be at rest. There's no need for anyone to be worried. If you're a U.S. citizen, you're good. Don't worry. Okay, go ahead.
But yeah, I guess there's a lot of fear going around about, them taking your citizenship away and this passport if you do one thing, incorrectly. But anyways, it seems like the hot topic is, okay, you have dual citizenship, so you hold U.S. passport, African passport, and now you're wondering, okay, what passports do I need to show when I enter this country, leave the other country? So the main thing, right, because the U.S. does accept dual citizenship, so they're not going to take your citizenship away because you have two citizenship, right? It's really up to the other country that you're from to, basically state the rules, right? But I assume if you have two citizenship is because your home country also accepts it. very few countries actually do not accept dual citizenship. But yes, so nothing really prevents you from entering your country with your other passport. Okay, so that may change, in a few months, who knows? Because with this administration, things, we hear new procedures, but that's not one of them. I know there's been like rumors going around. I've heard of it too, but nothing really says right now that you can't have two passports and that, you have to basically choose between the two. So, of course, you have to fight in the army for the U.S., then that's when you've pledged allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and loyalty to this nation, right? So that's when they would say, well, you have to fight for the U.S. But as far as
And then
keeping, another
one
country's
thing also,
passport,
so how will
you're safe to do that.
when it comes to buying your tickets, what passport, how do you use the passport? Or somebody would require you to present either a copy of your passport or something.
Yeah, and that's fine. Again, nothing prevents you from having two citizenships. So whichever passport you need to show, to avoid getting a visa, for example. I would probably need to get the equivalent of what's called the ESTA. So it's not a visa, but it's, what allows a U.S. citizen to be in France for 90 days. Well, I don't do that because, I have that French passport. So whatever I need to provide to show that, I am visa exempt, that's what I'm going to show.
That's the same thing we have with Canada too, right?
That's not going to cause you problems. Until further notice, if things change, I will let you know and your organization, and then we can have a different podcast on this. But as far as today, well, we are
anybody watching has any other immigration question here, because we've just tackled the hot topic. Okay, go ahead.
If someone enters the country illegally, and then marries a U.S. citizen, does that guarantee that they're set? I mean, what is the process for them to be able to be legally here? Is there any time at some point in life that when they're trying to apply for residency or, citizenship, that person has to first go back to their country and then later? Does it work?
Yeah. So, you really have to differentiate between those that come without inspections. So meaning illegally, right? They cross the border or they're not inspected by an immigration officer, or what's called paroled. So those people are subject to different rules, and those that entered with a visa and were inspected. So those that entered without inspection illegally, they're not able to adjust here, meaning they can't get a green card in the U.S. And at some point, they're going to have to leave. By then they have accumulated enough unlawful presence that they're going to have to apply for a waiver, what's called a waiver, right? Because when you accumulate more than 6 months unlawful presence, you're subject to a 3-year bar. More than 1 year unlawful presence, you have a 10-year bar from coming back to the U.S. And at that point, they require you to file for a waiver because you have either a 3-year bar or a 10-year bar. If you want to come before that, you need that waiver. But yeah, so what they did a few years ago is what's called a provisional waiver, what's called the I-601A, which allows people to get the approval of the waiver before even leaving the U.S. to go to the U.S. consulate and get their immigrant visa, so that they know at least they're not going to be stuck forever outside of the U.S. waiting for that waiver to be approved. It's going to be approved while they're here, provided, obviously they go back and get their green card immigrant visa at the border. Those waivers right now take a long time.
What if
about 4 years?
Yeah. What if it's an aid visa?
So that's their, their overstay visa is completely different. Like I have those all the time. So people that are tourist visa, all kinds of visas, or even parole, right? Because you had the Haitian TPS or the humanitarian parole that, a lot of people came with Haiti. And those, you can actually adjust, meaning you can apply for the green card with USCIS. And then you don't have to leave. So it's a huge difference, right? It's nice.
Let me see. There's one question. Viola, can you read that one? There's one that came up first from that whose iPhone. I don't know whose iPhone, but
okay, iPhone. Yeah, this question is can someone apply for what visa in the United States from the UK?
Yes. So if they're in the UK, you're gonna need an employer sponsor, right? So depending on that person's background, what they do, if they find an employer here willing to sponsor them. Yes, it's definitely possible. When we do consultations, we strategize, okay, what kind of visa you may be eligible for based on your credentials, on your work experience. But the main thing is, with the work visa comes the employer. We don't find employers, right, for people. They have to find their own employers. willing to sponsor them for a work visa. And then you have all kinds of visa. You have, those that require a bachelor's degree or higher. You have the J1, which is a great visa that they do require a sponsor, but it's not as limiting as the H1B, which is by lottery. So that one is a trainee or internships. You have the ones that I love. It's the extraordinary ability visa, the O visas, for those that have like artists that are well known. We've represented, a few actual African, bands and the groups. And then you have also the investor visa, but that's not really a work visa, right? It's based on your investment. And you have to belong to a country that has the E2 visa with the US. So, but there's more, but again, depending on the person's profile, then we can
And then
target which ones.
we got somebody
the best.
joining from London, England. Thanks for joining. And the question that they asked was what he wanted to ask. So, and then the app saying you can handle.
Yeah, I think I had her say you have to find an employer for yourself but if the person has an employer,
Apply.
that means if the employer has already done and everything and it's like, okay, we have you on board, is it the employer that is supposed to do all the process to get a work visa for that person?
Yeah,
Or do
so it's a two-part, right? So there's a petition that gets filed with USCIS. When that's approved, then the person goes and get their visa at the US consulate. So the first part is handled by the employer and that lawyer. Second part is the employee and the lawyer.
Another thing also is sometimes if the company that wants to sponsor you don't know how to go about the stuff and the rest, they can reach out to, because some companies might be their very first time they are trying to hire somebody from abroad.
Yeah, we get those a lot, especially right now. We have the H1B lottery coming up beginning of March. So we have a lot of employers, right, contacting us. So we do consultations with employers to kind of explain, okay, how the H1B process works or any other process. So it depends. Sometimes I have employees, that just want info and they don't have an employer. Sometimes it's the employer reaching out. But, I'm not going to lie to you. I mean, coming from abroad, not having had a working experience here in the US and trying to find an employer willing to sponsor you is going to be a very tough thing to do. So honestly, unless you're extraordinary and you have skills that
with enough certification
can't find here, it could be. But just know it is an investment, on the employer side. So they have to be willing and see their benefit in investing in you.
Awesome. So, hey, people, any other question? Drop it in. Drop the questions now before it's too late. I'm looking at the chat to see. You just put in your question now and we will answer it. Oh, wow.
12 questions.
We got a lot of people have been asking me. I see a lot of people asking me how to.
Yeah, I think last time I provided, I can put it here. So we do work with consultations, to tell you the truth, because I would not be able to handle so many inquiries per day. We are busy, but you can contact my intake person, intake@bpimmigration.com, drop your questions, see if we can help. And if so, then you probably have to schedule a consultation. And we haven't talked about the consultation with Austin. So we'll have to discuss that. See if we can do maybe a lower fee for those guys.
Hey, community members, that's what I'm here for. I'm here to provide you with resources and access to resources. So that's all I'm about. One thing I want you to know that Maud has been a huge supporter of our community from the since 2016, 2017, I think. So yeah. So she's been there. And then if you are from a French-speaking country, no problem. She speaks French, so she can talk with you in your own terms, in the way you understand. So, nice.
Portuguese. That was it. English, I guess. And some French.
I will put the link for you to contact. I know you're asking me so that you guys can reach out and just say you're on the podcast or you're from African Leaders Council and stuff, and she will know it's you. Yeah. Already. So, Paola, you have any question, any other thing?
Thank you for your time.
I'm done with questions. The hot topic has been answered, so I'm free.
Yeah, another question I wanted to ask is about if you're inviting a sibling, but she already passed on that, and she already said it takes a long time. If you're inviting a sibling, and then I figured, it's easier to invite a parent than inviting a sibling, you know? She already talked about that. I had a question with
Yes and no, because for a parent, it's actually very quick to sponsor them because they could be here in a year and a half time, 2 years, right? If you sponsor them for a green card. So the officer may be less likely to grant a visa to your parent because they know, well, they could be here and immigrate with in no time, in 2 years. So, whether they do consider that in their decision, it's unknown, frankly. But, that's something that the person could say, well, it's going to take 17 years for my immigrant visa to come through and I cannot adjust in the US. So yeah, what we didn't mention earlier, even if you came right with a tourist visa, unless you're a parent of a US citizen, a child of a US citizen, or a spouse of a US citizen, any other category, you have to go back home to apply for your green card unless you've been here lawfully the whole time. So for a sibling, given that it takes 17 years, they would have to go back home anyways to apply for that immigrant visa. They would not be eligible for that type of green card. Unlike a parent who, they come here, even if they overstay their visa, they would be eligible to get a green card. And so that may be what also scares the consular officer. Okay, does the parent have enough ties back home? How do we know they're coming back after their visit? Because if they have a U.S. citizen child, what's not to say that they are going to sponsor them and give them a green card? So it's a fine balance. And, you really have to show your strong ties. That's all I can emphasize because there is a high likelihood that the person, may not come back.
Is this one an immigration issue or somebody's asking what happens if you are stopped on the street with just your...
I was about to ask, just without
those are getting, they're having issues, so he said that he was going to target the criminals. That's not true. Everybody's a target these days, but mostly, those people that maybe had final order of deportation, those that entered illegally. I haven't really seen cases of people that maybe overstayed their visa are getting targeted. It's hard to really, say, okay, these people are targeted. These are not. It's like,
Yeah, because
you don't have a status.
Because they are not putting out
you should be concerned.
information about what's happening at all. So anything you hear is probably maybe from somebody that's close to you, something, but they are not putting out any data on what's happening. Yeah. Oh,
There's another question here. What about if someone comes to the U.S. and files for refuge?
Because the refugee does not apply in the U.S. So, I guess they file for asylum. Technically they're safe, right? So no, filing for asylum, I'm supposed to protect you from removal. Again, as of today, this could change. We know this president is not in favor of asylee status. So, if they can send people back, they will. But as of now, if you file for asylum, technically you're protected. They're not going to send you back home. So, I guess that's what's happening with a lot of TPS grants. So those that had TPS status from Haiti, Venezuela, or other countries, and that our TPS status is going to be, it's going to end soon. A lot of them are filing for asylum because that's what's going to protect them from being deported. So that's all I can suggest.
Awesome. Yeah. So
for now,
everybody, let me share her email. If you need to contact, you can. It's on.
Put it on the chat already. Yeah.
VP Immigration, right? Yeah. So
yes, intake at vpimmigration.com.
Reach out to her and she will get it. And Bella, anything to say before
we actually 2 minutes. We have 2 minutes left, but there's one. I think hopefully this is the last one for today. Tammy is asking, how about the form that people are being asked to fill out to denounce their green card? Is that happening?
I am not sure. I have not heard of anything, but just to let you know, they can't force you to renounce. I think that's what you mean, like renounce your green card or abandon your green card. Yeah. And that's usually when you, I guess, come into the U.S. CBP. Obviously they can ask you, okay, where have you been all this time? You've not been living in the U.S. and you've stayed outside of the U.S. for way too long. So, anything past 6 months or more, that's going to be a huge red flag. But even then, like multiple trips of long periods of time spent outside of the U.S. is going to be a trigger. And they can, obviously inquire about your true intentions and where is your primary residence. So that's what it comes down to, right? So you can't just be, oh, okay, I'm spending 5 months overseas, 1 month in the US, 5 months overseas, 1 month in the US. You know, if you continue to do that, customs is going to start inquiring and, you know, wanting to make sure that your primary residence remains in the US, not overseas. But bottom line is they cannot force you to file that I-407 form to abandon your green card.
That's what I,
Maybe
that's what
suggest
I heard
it,
is happening.
but they cannot
That they
force you.
will
So you remain a
put it in a way like you have to sign it and stuff, but you don't have to.
Nope. Now, the alternative is they will send you to CBP offices for what's called deferred inspection. You know, don't abandon your green card until you know for sure you're not coming
That's
back
the
to the US.